It's very rare and it sends real shockwaves through the community.
It was like something out of a film that you would never see in your local street. What kind of person would actually do that?
The way in which she was disposed of is just utterly disgusting. The investigation had to be her voice. She wasn't there to say what happened to her.
It was quite clear the complete devastation that had been caused by the death of their daughter.
He's a manipulator. He's just a cold-hearted killer.
Just 16 miles south of Birmingham, but nestled in the rolling hills of Worcestershire, lies Bromsgrove.
Bromsgrove is a peaceful place and it's very tranquil.
Not much here. Not much really happens.
There's quite a village feel to it because it's surrounded by countryside and it's got country pubs, it's got a nice canal.
It's got a lovely community. They're all very friendly.
They know their neighbours and help each other out.
I've left several times. I always end up coming back home. It's where your heart is, really.
In the beating heart of Bromsgrove live the Salanghys.
Nezam and Zobaidah lived in Talbot Road in Bromsgrove. Nice estate. And it has a row of shops, and in that row of shops was Nezam and Zobaidah's takeaway pizza business, Prego Pizza. It was owned by Nezam. Zobaidah would help and serve behind the counter.
And it was plainly quite a popular place for local residents to go to.
I don't know what they did with them pizzas, but their pizzas were really nice.
Zobaidah was very attractive. I took quite a shine to her. She'd just got this aura about her which sort of drew you in with her smile.
Nezam was very talkative. We had quite a few conversations with him. They seemed a very nice couple, very pleasant.
Nezam and Zobaidah are also proud members of the local Afghan community. They have 2 young children, one 6, the other just 4 years old.
She went about her daily life as best she could, loved her kids. They were the centre of her world.
She was a devoted mother and the family life was everything for her.
But life in Talbot Road is about to change forever.
Hello, police. Nezam contacted West Mercia Police to report Zobaidah missing.
At the time, Nezam said that his wife had gone out for a run and never returned.
Nezam also reveals something else to police.
There were a number of texts on his phone that reported to have come from Zobaidah. One which said something along the lines of, I love someone else, I want to pass my time with them. Zobaidah had left him and she had told him via text that she was going back to Afghanistan. She couldn't cope in the UK, didn't want to remain here, and of course had mentioned another man in her life.
Nezam had shown the texts to a friend at his mosque.
The gentleman concerned told Nezam that he should call the police and let them know that Zobaidah was missing, which of course he did.
But leaving her children behind seems at odds with devoted mother Zobaidah. Police launch a missing person inquiry.
Missing persons reports are taken very seriously, particularly when they are out of character. That inquiry would have been passed to a response officer via a patrol sergeant, and there are a template of inquiries that would have taken place in response to trying to find out where Zobaidah was.
The police will investigate places known to Zobaidah Salangy So, for example, they would go to addresses that they know that she would go to. They would speak to people that she is associated with, just to see whether or not there is any information whatsoever that can help them locate Zobaidah.
There would also have been the local inquiries being conducted, house-to-house inquiries. Are there any footprints where they would normally be or not?
Investigators focus on Zobaidah Street, where she was reportedly last seen going for a run.
When she was first reported missing, we were at home because we had a knock on the door from the police asking if we had seen her. The police asked us if we had any dashcam footage of their house. The police have took our SD card from the car, and obviously there was no footage on there. But apart from that, I found it to be a bit strange that she went missing. It was just very strange.
The police shortly after did put out a press release to the media saying, could we report that she was missing and if anybody had information about it, and it was front page news in Bromsgrove. I wrote articles on it at the time. She was a young mother of two and somebody who was well known in the area, and it seemed a surprise that she would suddenly disappear. It didn't seem to make sense, and a lot of people were interested in it and worried about her as well.
I was going through social media. It said that Zobaidah had gone missing on the Sunday. The neck hairs stood up. In my heart, I knew something terrible had happened. I commented on that post, a lovely woman, I hope she's found safe.
The reasons behind it just don't seem clear. It seemed like a bit of a mystery for the area, and especially as a lot of people had only seen her a few days before serving up pizzas in the takeaway.
There was no trace of Zobaidah anywhere, of course, apart from the text messages.
Detectives start investigating Zobaidah's links overseas.
Zobaidah Salangy was an Afghan national, and she was one of 8 children who lived in the Hindu Kush region, mountains just outside of Kabul.
So Zobaidah was born in 1991 in Afghanistan. She was raised there with her extended family, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, obviously her parents. She qualified as a maths teacher and actually worked in a school in Afghanistan.
And she was a highly educated woman and had aspirations.
Zobaidah came to the UK as a result of her marriage to Nezam Salangy. That was an arranged traditional marriage between the families. And Zobaidah came to the UK to be with Nezam in around 2013.
She carried on wanting to learn, and she was going to evening classes to do English at college.
She had a really strong work ethic, not only from working at Prego Pizza, but her desire and drive to help other people in terms of education. And it was ultimately to be her dream that she would work in the education system in the United Kingdom.
Investigators are puzzled. Inquiries reveal Zobaidah making a go of life in Britain. But her missing persons report suggests she's not happy with her life here.
And straight away, when you get a missing person inquiry like that, where it is totally out of character, that raises red flags. You just get that feeling that something is just not right.
Police start to scour the family home.
A search of the property would be conducted with the consent of the owner. That is standard in missing person inquiries. Checking loft spaces, etc., just to make sure that that individual isn't actually where they should be at home.
Nezam Salangy took police to show her wardrobe and an 8-inch gap in her clothes rail where she had taken clothing and left.
And there were 2 handwritten notes to the children explaining why she's left.
Police officers attended Prego Pizza and they searched the rear of the premises.
He was searched by a pulsar team, which is a number of officers who are specifically trained. They're licensed search officers. One of their major skills is searching, detailed searching, leave no void unexplored.
They searched, in particular, a storage area where there were many boxes.
In the rear storeroom, concealed on a shelf, which could only be accessed via stepladders, we found a purse which had been secreted behind a load of pizza packing boxes. That was Zobaidah's purse. In that purse was her driving licence, some photographs of her children, and some cash.
It was something they felt that she wouldn't have left behind if she'd actually run off with somebody else.
In that same area, in a cavity within the wall space, was an iPhone box, a mobile phone box, wrapped in bubble wrap. And in there was a phone that subsequently transpired to be used by Zobaidah to contact her family in Afghanistan.
That was a real pivotal moment for the police investigation.
It became quite obvious that something was severely wrong.
In Bromsgrove, mother of two, Zobaidah Salangy, has been missing for nearly a week. As investigators continue searching the takeaway business she runs with her husband Nezam, word spreads across the local community.
I actually took it upon myself to drive past Prego Pizza because I'd been so upset. I didn't know what had happened, and I saw forensic vans, people in white suits carrying trays from Prego Pizza and putting them into the van. At that point, I think I knew that something is wrong.
Investigators start analysing their discoveries at the premises, Zobaidah's phone and her driving licence.
It's a very significant find because Zobaidah wasn't yet in possession of a British passport, so her driving licence would have been absolutely key for her as a form of identification. And of course, if she was going to leave, why would she leave images of her children who were very dear to her, as you would expect, at home and not take them with her? And then of course, her one means of contacting her family, that phone, was massively significant because that was her only support network, her contact with her family in Afghanistan.
By now, police have also spoken to Zobaidah's family overseas.
It's very clear that she was someone who was very loved indeed by her family. Such was that love that they would regularly contact each other every single day.
Officers made contact with Mr. Valzadar, Zobaidah's father, in Afghanistan, and it became apparent that he'd not heard from his daughter since the 27th of March.
And that was really unusual because she was so family orientated. So if Zobaidah was planning to leave the country and go home, then her family would have been the first people that she'd contacted, and they would know that she was on her way. So the fact that they hadn't heard from her was really distressing.
The police would have understandably been very concerned at this stage because, having been shown by Nezam Salangy part of her wardrobe missing, text messages purportedly from her indicating that she had left him and the family. But in fact, having searched Prego Pizza, they discovered something completely different. So suspicions quickly turned on Nezam Salangy.
People in the local community are also questioning Nezam's claims.
It was common knowledge that Nezam had said she'd gone out for a jog on the Sunday and not come back.
Thought there's no way she would have been out jogging. No way. Because we never seen her apart from school runs, going to work, coming back from work. That's the only time I would see her. Definitely not for a jog.
Who goes out for a jog, leaving your children? Personally, myself, I never left my children in that situation. So that did not ring true at all.
On social media, there were a lot of questions. I think there was a lot of disbelief that she would have actually left the country. She seemed that she was quite settled here and she had a family, and it didn't seem to make sense.
Detectives soon discover something sinister about the seemingly happy couple.
For customers at the pizza parlour, they'd just see the couple behind the counter who were friendly and chatty, and it seemed like a normal marriage. A few people who got closer to them did comment that there were signs that maybe things behind closed doors weren't so happy.
I'd always try and make conversation, try and get Zobaidah to sort of look at me, you know. She was a very shy person, but I think as I came to know them as a couple, there were a few red flags that I picked up on during my visits there. I noticed every time I spoke to Zobaidah, Nezam would stop what he was doing and turn his head, and she would sort of crumble, go very quiet, look away, and not acknowledge that I was there, and she would sort of like fade into the background. I had a feeling that she wanted to communicate more, but felt she couldn't. And I'd commented to my husband a few times that I felt he was controlling her. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. I ended up fleeing to a women's refuge. And one of the things they teach you there is how to recognise a manipulator.
It was a relationship that was plagued with lots of troubles. She would regularly argue with Nezam.
I don't think it was a happy marriage. I sensed that Zobaidah felt extremely trapped by the culture that she'd married into, trapped by the fact that she loved her kids and would do anything for them and would not leave for that reason. There was clearly some abuse, which was reflected in numerous phone calls between Zobaidah and her family back in Afghanistan. She would contact them regularly. Her family would tell us that she would often speak of her unhappiness and her physical and emotional abuse within her marriage at the hands of Nezam.
Zobaidah's friend Samantha confirms investigators' worst fears.
I told them I'd noticed a few red flags. The next thing they asked me if they could come and take a statement from me, which they did do. And I said, one time I went in with my husband and I looked at Zobaidah as I was stood waiting, and I noticed that she got a black eye. It looked like she'd covered it up with some foundation. It was purple and black, and I spoke to her. I asked her what she had done. All the time Nezam was glaring at her and said basically she'd banged it on the cooker hood. I didn't believe her immediately. I did not believe her. I was talking to my husband as we left the shop, and I said, I believe he's done that. I think he's going to end up killing her.
As the inquiry moved on, his willingness to assist began to dwindle, which also, of course, arose suspicions with the investigating officers.
Part of the investigation process by the police into this missing persons inquiry involved them looking at bank accounts, and they discovered that there had been transactions on one of her accounts in various locations.
Detectives spot transactions made after Zobaidah reportedly went missing.
These were cash withdrawals in Birmingham. So, of course, CCTV inquiries are conducted at those cash points to see if we can establish who is withdrawing that cash.
And when they viewed that CCTV footage, they saw a figure who they believed to be Nezam Salangy. Understandably, the police would have been very suspicious of this, given what Nezam Salangy had previously told them, that she had run away with another man and wasn't coming back.
More significantly, an analysis of the phone data shows that the texts purportedly sent by Zobaidah from her phone to Nezam's phone were actually sent whilst her phone was in Bromsgrove.
This obviously led the police to be very suspicious indeed, and ultimately showed Nezam to be lying about Zobaidah having left the area.
We could tell from the location of Zobaidah's phone and the location of Nezam's phone at the time the text messages were sent that they were actually co-locating, and the phones were moving round together. So it couldn't have been Zobaidah who was sending those texts.
The police quickly concluded that Nezam Salangy had himself sent these messages using her mobile phone to message his phone.
He had actually been sending these texts to himself, pretending to be his wife.
It was clear that Nezam was fabricating a series of events to try and show some proof that Zobaidah was conducting her daily business, i.e. sending text messages, withdrawing money from the bank. We've got the significant fines at Prego Pizza, the phone, the purse, and his unwillingness to cooperate with inquiries is amazingly suspicious and absolutely tipped the balance into something far more sinister or potentially likely a homicide.
With all this information, the police made the decision, and quite rightly, that a missing persons inquiry quickly became into a murder inquiry. And they attended Nezam's address on Talbot Road and arrested him on suspicion of murder.
In Bromsgrove, takeaway owner Nezam Salangy is in custody on suspicion of murdering his wife and mother of two, Zobaidah.
We learned that he'd been arrested, which was completely, massive shock.
At this point, we've gone from a missing person report to suspected murder, and that's huge in terms of how the community felt, but also what was being reported in the media. Murders were very rare in Bromsgrove, and it sent real shockwaves through the community.
From that day on, really, the whole street was swarmed with police cars, police vans, a massive tow truck to remove the cars.
It was headline news for us at the newspaper, and everyone wanted to know more about what could have led to this.
Most of the kind of like gossip that was going round was that they believed that Nezam had done something to her. And I think that just goes to show how many people kind of like had a feeling something was going on, like domestic abuse. Didn't want to voice their opinions. I thought horrendous thoughts that he had killed her, and thoughts as to what I could have done differently. Was there anybody I could have gone and told?
Once you've decided to make an arrest, straight away the clock is ticking in respect of your ability and the time you have to deal with that individual you've got in custody. There's a lot of pressure on an SIO and their team to make ground as fast and as best as they can.
Investigators seize their suspect's mobile. What they find on it confirms what the family have told them.
Nezam had captured a video on his mobile phone. There'd clearly been a domestic argument on the 27th of March. The children were present in the house. It was clearly very emotional. They were arguing in Afghan.
In that argument, Zobaidah was holding a kitchen knife to her wrist in what was plainly a complete act of desperation. She was, by this stage, terribly unhappy in the relationship that she was in.
And threatening to self-harm, and locked herself in the bathroom. During it, she yells at him that he'd destroyed her life for the last 8 years, which is how long they'd been married.
And basically saying to him, you carry on filming, you know, you've made me so unhappy. And of course, Nezam was keen for people to see that.
Under questioning, Nezam maintains his story, that his wife has fled their marital home.
I think Nezam was keen that video represented that Zobaidah was suffering from some kind of mental health episode or was very desperate, and therefore the fact that she may have gone missing may have come as no surprise.
But analysts find even more interesting activity on Nezam's phone, recorded the day after their violent argument.
On the 28th of March, Nezam, his brother Ramin and his brother Yazin all commenced using 3 new phone numbers that had not previously been used before, which in itself is suspicious. 28th of March is the last time that anybody had ever seen or heard from Zobaidah, and she was never to be seen again.
One of the phones had only been activated for 48 hours and seemed to be a burner phone, and it raised suspicions over why somebody would do that at the same time that Zobaidah went missing.
Detectives now focus on Nezam's brothers and their movements that day.
Ramin and Zobaidah Salangy lived in Cardiff, but they worked in Caerphilly in a pizza takeaway. The police investigation turned to the pizza takeaway in Caerphilly, and that included examining the CCTV footage of what had been going on in the takeaway that showed unusual and suspicious behaviour between Ramin and Yasin, both on mobile telephones, on the 28th of March.
Investigators trace calls being made to their brother Nezam, but this is the first time they have spoken to him all year.
CCTV footage revealed that shortly after 10 p.m, Zobaidah Salangy was seen to reach underneath a counter and retrieve a mobile phone that he handed to Ramin.
And as a result of that phone data inquiries, we could see that on the night of the 28th of March, Ramin actually travelled up from Newport and came to Bromsgrove and met with Nezam.
During questioning, Nezam comes up with an explanation.
He told the police that the reason why Ramin had come from Caerphilly down to Bromsgrove was because a part of the oven in Prego Pizza had broken, and that he had requested his brother to come down with a particular part to replace in the broken oven. In fact, there was nothing wrong with the oven whatsoever. So the police attention turned to Nezam Salangy to see exactly what he had been doing that day.
The 28th of March is really significant because we know on that day that Nezam was expecting a gent to come to the pizza shop. He actually contacted that gent and said, "Don't bother coming, I'm not opening the pizza shop," and gave an excuse along the lines of something was wrong with one of the pizza ovens and therefore business was not going to be conducted as usual. And of course that gent never came.
The police also spoke to one of the chefs who worked at Prego Pizza, and they established from him that in fact Nezam Salangy had cancelled the chef for that day.
Police uncover something else rather sinister about the 28th of March.
Part of the police inquiry revealed that a tenant who had been living up above in a flat in Prego Pizza had been contacted by Nezam Salangy.
We actually traced that individual, and he confirms that Nezam actually called him on the 28th to see when he was coming back into the country. And again, this was really suspicious, taken together with the cancellation of the gent coming up on that day. He clearly wanted no one around to interfere with what he had to do.
Police now suspect this was the day Zobaidah was killed. and Ramin was called upon that evening to help his brother Nezam dispose of the body.
It was key to the investigation to know where Nezam and Ramin have gone during these hours where they're together in and around Bromsgrove. Crucial to those inquiries are CCTV. We knew they were in a white Nissan vehicle. Although you couldn't see the registration number of that vehicle, a similar vehicle was captured on numerous pieces of CCTV from various locations. It basically showed that vehicle travelling out of Bromsgrove towards an area called Lower Bentley. During the early hours of the morning, we were able to calculate that they were probably in or around the area of Lower Bentley for approximately 2.5 to 3 hours for the return journey into Bromsgrove. We had the phone that Nezam was carrying linking to the Wi-Fi at Prego Pizza, so we could time when they got back to that location. A short stop at Prego Pizza before going back out to Lower Bentley. Our hypothesis being that they've gone out to Lower Bentley, prepared an area for deposition disposal, they've come back into Bromsgrove, collected Zobaidah, gone back out to that area and disposed of her body.
But finding Zobaidah's body is a different story. Limited mobile coverage in rural Worcestershire makes it harder to track the suspect's phones.
You are entering a massively rural area. It's huge. Fields, farms, canals, all stretching along the side of the motorway. We were unable to pinpoint exactly where they'd been, so it became a priority to sectorise that vast area and methodically, day by day, put officers through that area on foot with dogs. Huge operation, massively time-consuming.
The police started searching the area. It was noticeable that they were looking out in the countryside, and that spread like wildfire, and people started to question whether actually she'd been buried somewhere.
There were about 20 police, 10 on either side of the lane, with long sticks, were sweeping through the side of the road, trying to see if there was anything in there in the hedges. And then the drones, when they came, were up in the opposite direction down there, and they were just searching in the fields all around.
It's really, really frustrating because you know that you are generally in the right area, but you just don't know where exactly you need to be.
Suddenly, there's a breakthrough.
Just off a road called Copy Holt Lane, search officers came across what looked like a grave-shaped marking in the ground in a copse. It was a secluded area of woodland next to a lake. It also looked as if it had been disguised with branches and leaves, and of course they were extremely suspicious.
Investigators seal off the scene.
They'd got a car across the road blocking it off, and were putting up, police tape around the area. It was clearly some sort of a crime scene.
To find that grave in our area of interest was highly significant. That's what we were looking for.
The police excavated this area of ground by hand, and they dug down to a natural level of clay.
But unfortunately, Zobaidah wasn't found there.
At this stage, the police were understandably frustrated by the fact that Zobaidah Salangy's body had not been found, despite them having dug what they thought to be her grave. So the task for the police was made more difficult. But with great care and determination, they put together all the evidence that they had to be able to put before the Crown Prosecution Service and a decision be made to charge Nezam Salangy with murder.
You may have convinced the CPS, but you've got to convince a jury beyond all reasonable doubt that he is guilty of that murder.
Bromsgrove takeaway owner Nezam Salangy has been charged with the murder of his missing 28-year-old wife, Zobaidah. But police still haven't found a body.
Just because Nezam had been charged, in some regards, with a no-body murder, the job has only just started.
Investigators home in on the role of Nezam's brother, Ramin.
When Ramin Salangy was arrested and interviewed by police, he initially spun the same tale as his brother did. But when the police confronted him with all the evidence that they had gathered, it was then that he began to tell the police more information. Zobaidah was dead and that she had hung herself.
And they brought the body down from the flat above Prego Pizza and put it into the back of Nezam's car.
He indicated the purpose of the trips out to Lower Bentley was to dispose of her body.
That was a real breakthrough moment for the police, because at that point Nezam hadn't said anything about what happened.
As a result of his admission, Ramin Salangy is charged with assisting an offender. But to make their case watertight, police need to find Zobaidah. In August 2020, DCI Mark Peters is brought in to head up the investigation.
My absolute objective was to find Zobaidah. I feel like she almost becomes part of your life. I'd photograph of her on my phone. I would have sleepless nights. Absolutely all-consuming, because we just did not know where she was, and it was totally frustrating. So I decided to go to one of the pre-trial hearings at Worcester Crown Court. And that's the first time I'd seen Nezam and Ramin in the flesh. And I looked at them and I just thought, you two are anything but master criminals. And it just got me thinking, why would you go to the trouble of digging a grave, finding it not fit for purpose, then you'll fill that grave back in and go to the lengths they did to try and disguise it? So I canvassed a number of key individuals within the team. The opinion of the forensic archaeologist was that he was 98% sure from the crime scene photography that we were at the bottom of that grave from the first dig, and that 2% was just too much for me. I want to be 100% sure that we hadn't missed something at that location.
So the police went back and they decided to dig again at the exact spot they had before, at that makeshift grave.
And then went further, about 5 inches.
And lo and behold, having done so, the police found the body of Zobaidah Salangy.
It was such a relief. It was very, very emotional, and it's a day I will never, ever forget.
The news spreads throughout Zobaidah's hometown.
When they found her, although it was very emotional, I was glad that they'd found her for her family.
I just couldn't believe it. Shock, really. Just awful, absolutely awful.
I attended the post-mortem. Unfortunately, due to the passage of time that Zobaidah had remained in the grave, we were unable to establish an absolute cause of death. But we can establish very compelling evidence as to what had happened. She was wrapped in household bin bags. She was in a Primark duvet cover, which essentially formed a kind of sack tied with rope. The pillowcase of that duvet set had been located during a previous search at Talbot Road. Her feet were bound with a curtain wire, and when we went back to Talbot Road, there was one window, the front living room, that had curtain wire that was absent.
This was a hugely significant find because obviously it gave a direct link from Zobaidah Salangy back to the home of Nezam.
The parting letters supposedly left by Zobaidah are also proven to be fakes.
We were able to prove, with the use of a handwriting expert, that in fact there is no way she could have written those letters.
This was a case that was filled with pieces of circumstantial evidence, and like a puzzle, those pieces in isolation didn't appear to be anything substantial. But when they were put together, it was very clear indeed to see the involvement of Nezam Salangy in the murder of Zobaidah.
"18 months after finding Zobaidah's body, her husband Nezam finally faces justice. He pleads not guilty to murder, and his brothers Ramin and Yasin plead not guilty to charges of assisting an offender.
I went to court and I testified. I felt like I had to be that voice for Zobaidah. Nezam had got his feet up. He didn't look bothered at all. He was just staring straight at me. I tried to avoid eye contact, but on the occasion that I looked at him, he was just smirking. And he didn't look regretful at all. The defence was quite gruelling. They tried to say that Zobaidah did in fact have a black eye, but that was years ago. And I said, no, it was 6 weeks before she went missing. So I just basically stood my ground. I had to be strong. I wanted to make sure she was not forgotten.
The prosecution reveals how the violent row captured on Nezam's smartphone the day before Zobaidah went missing was to be their last.
That night after he went to the pizza parlour, that she went on Facebook and unfriended him and his brothers and was searching for cleaning jobs.
To stop his wife from leaving him, Nezam decides on murder.
During the court case, the web of lies that Nezam had put together was completely unravelled. The prosecution showed that a lot of what he'd said just wasn't true, and piece by piece, it showed that he was just a heartless killer.
After a 7-week trial, the jury retires.
When the guilty verdicts came in, it was a feeling of huge relief.
Upon being found guilty, he became very vocal towards the officers in the case, essentially alleging that we fabricated evidence to stitch him up.
I think he thought he was going to get away with it. I felt glad that he's got what he deserves.
Nezam Salangy is jailed for a minimum of 18 years. Ramin Salangy sentenced to 6 years, and his brother Yasin for 4 years and 9 months.
Of course, it's the verdict we wanted, but it doesn't bring Zobaidah back.
The murder has also left its mark on Bromsgrove.
Even now, there's still times when people think about it, especially going past there in that precinct, and just to think that they had a killer in their community.
If I could speak to Zobaidah now, I think I'd rather go back in the past. Said, look, come with me. I'll take you somewhere, anywhere away from him. Because then she'd still be here. But I hope she's out there somewhere and she knows that I've done something for her.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support.